what is brand strategy, and how do you do brand strategy for personal brand? And do you even have to do brand strategy for personal brand?
Okay, it's a really good question. Right, good question from start. Okay, so the thing is, I have a background in building corporate brands or brands for products, for corporations, for companies. So it's a little bit different from personal brands. So the first thing I would say is that one of the things that I think is most important when it comes to building a brand is to find what makes you different. And if we're going to be totally clear, most companies are very unclear at what makes them different. And they're also pretty boring often. So we kind of have to work a lot with like, what is the company culture here? How can we bring that out in the personality? What makes you different? How do you want to stand out? How are we going to position this? So all of that takes a lot of facilitation. It's not that we make things up, but it takes some time to really find it inside the company by doing facilitation. The difference for me with a personal brand is that you don't have to do that deep dive because you are you and you are your brand. And you already have values and a personality and everything. So it's so much easier. You don't have to align around it, a group of people. It's just you.
Okay. So like in a corporate brand when there's a bunch of people, how do you do that? What does that process look like?
For me, it's really important. I say that I'm very human-centered, and that can sound maybe cliche, but I don't think it is, because what I mean by that is a brand, we need to feel something about a brand. I think we're agreeing about that, right? There need to be some emotions around a brand and what we offer and how we talk. So it's really important for me to start with the leadership and the culture in the company, because how can we know who we are and what we stand up for if we don't know who's actually in the company? So I think it's really important to bring in people. I talk to people like employees. I involve them in workshops. I do that for who they are, but I also do it for who they talk to, like their audience. So for me, it's really important to really listen into people, because otherwise it will be that I'm creating something with a group of executives and then we tell people who we are. And if they don't align with that, they will not live that brand. So for me, it's important to know like who we truly are, our beliefs, needs to be inside of every person inside of the company. It doesn't matter if you're in sales, marketing, work in the reception, customer service. Everyone needs to know who the brand is and how to live the brand in every interaction every day.
Yeah. So, my agency, we used to work with a lot of corporate brands. We don't anymore. And almost every brand that we work with, there's a big difference between what the C-suite wants or what the executives think their brand is.
Yeah.
And what so there's no agreement between like the top and the people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, for example, like
exactly.
CEOs and CMOs will be like, oh, we're all about transparency. And then you talk to the customer service and you find out that's not true at all. Or people say we're all about customer service and you talk to the customer service reps and you find out it's not true at all.
Yeah.
So how do you align that? Like what do you do? And do executives push back when you?
Yes, they do. But they do push back, many of them. But when they understand, it's like with coaching. You can't just tell people what to do. You have to ask questions and you have to kind of involve people so they feel it's their own decision too. So it's one part with leadership, like
so you have to coach the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, that's what I do all the time. So it's one thing like, here's the vision, we're going in this direction. I think that's pretty clear that the leaders must be able to say that and make those decisions. We can't ask like 500 people, where are we going? Because that would be chaos. That's one thing with the business vision and where you're heading. But when it comes to really like values and culture and how we are going to show up in the world, because branding is not just how we look like or how we talk, it's also how we behave. So I had to educate them about this, even when they're bigger companies, bigger brands. I'm like, we need to bring in. So instead of saying like 5 value words and have a facilitation with a couple of C-suites, it will only be a cliche. It will be a couple of words that everyone else have the same words. I want to go deeper. I want to hear the stories. Like I want to hear real stories why this word is actually important, this value. So we can, instead of just saying this is who we are, 5 words, we can share different stories in this is who we are because of this. This is how we show up, and we tell a story about this. And also it could be this is what we're definitely not doing.
Yeah.
Because if we do that, we really like it, we make it much more easy for people to see it in their daily lives. And they know if there is a decision, for example, I worked with a company where it's like, we're Swedish. we have Swedish food. Everything we buy should be from Sweden. And then we found out that they bought apples from China. I'm like, why did you do that? No, because they didn't cost as much. Yeah, but okay. So something is not aligned here because they thought their job was to do as lowest price. But it was pretty clear that that was totally against all policies, all about the brand. So they were supposed to do something else.
When there's conflict like that, what's the real brand? Is it the is the real brand like Swedish based, or is the real brand lowest price?
No, the real brand is definitely the Swedish based. That was just a misunderstanding internally in the company, and you have to be sure that that doesn't happen, because that was not just clear communication. So it's really important to know, like, what do we stand up for and how do we live that in every decision? So it's like an ethical compass too. So everyone who works in a company need to know, if someone buy me a ticket to this, event worth thousands of dollars, is that okay that I actually say yes to that, or is it not? Like, we have to have an inner compass, what's okay to do or not. So for me, that's really important to have as a part of the brand too, because that's how we are going to show up. So when you go on a dinner, with the friends, you will talk about your company.
Yeah. So when let's say you create this brand strategy and do, it's like, we're Swedish based, blah, 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 all of that happened. That means the company actually has to instill that value and do the inner work.
Yes.
Not just like for the brand messaging, but also the company actually has to do it.
Yes.
And I guess what I found is this. At the end of the day, most companies that I interview, because I do, I actually do the same thing. We used to interview all the salespeople without any of the C-suite in the room, like just the salespeople. And then we do the same thing with customer rep, and we hear very different things from each other. We actually hear the opposite things, right? Like people here are like, oh, like we're all about customer service, like, but then when we talk to the customer service, be like, oh, but they want us off the phone by this time and blah 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 blah. So we just try to get through as much. So we hear 2 different things, right? And then like our customers are not happy about our customer service because of that. Blah, blah, blah. So I hear that, and a lot of times what I end up realizing is actually what the C-suite is saying is that we're all about customer service was actually a lie. It's what they wish their brand was.
Yes.
But the thing is, at the end of the day, your brand is not what you wish it to be. Like, I feel like companies already have an existing way of doing things, and you can't really that it's almost like a fabric of their, like, it's so ingrained in their DNA that you can't just go in and change that. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I do think you can, if it depends on. I mean, this is why we need to be very strategic consultants, because if you get in and you don't have that they don't listen to you that way, then it will always be a problem, because they see this as something as the visual identity or the messaging or advertising. I see it as, I don't put lipstick on a pig, and I tell them before we start working, I don't put lipstick on a pig. And they're like, what do you mean? What I mean by that is, you need to do the work first, and then we communicate about it. I'm not going to work for a company who's not willing to change. So if I know, because positioning is aspiring where you want to be, because otherwise you will never push yourself in any direction. But if we see that the gap between who you want to be and how you actually show up, your true brand, if that gap is big, they need to be aware that they need to take action on it. And if they're not open to do that, I don't want to work with them. Because then it's like, it's not better than greenwash. You know?
So you have to do some sort of a due diligence up front to even know,
Yeah.
like, do I want to work with this client?
Yes.
Like, are they sticking by their values or not?
Also because I've been working so much with focus on sustainability, and you can just imagine if you go out and you position yourself as a brand with focus on environmental sustainability, and then people find out what you truly do, like that would be a disaster.
But that happens all the time, right? Like Taylor Swift is big on environment, but she flies around in private jets. So like the like what people say is and what how they act is two very different things, and I think that's pretty normal. Actually, it's not very. Yeah,
I think it's just being transparent about it, and I think that's what I try to teach people I work with all the time, and even students. I'm like, you know what? Why not just tell the way it is? Because we all have things. I am the same. I feel with my personal brand, I'm like, I do care a lot about the environment. I think about how I live. I think about what kind of, I have an electric car. I recycle everything. I think a lot about, I eat less meat than I used to do. A lot of things that is important, but I still travel because I'm so damn happy that I'm finally want to go into an airplane and actually fly somewhere after 15 years. So I do that. So instead of trying to hide that, I'm like, you know what? I'm doing my best and I take responsibility for other things that I do. And I'm aware and how I can prioritize, but I'm not going to try to hide that. So I think it's the same for a corporate company. They're like, we know that we suck at those three things.
Yeah.
We're taking action right now. This is what we do, super transparent. So don't be too harsh on us, please. We will keep you updated what we're doing. And just being super transparent and do the work, but do it in public because people will find out anyway. So why not be open?
Yeah, well, I think one of the easiest way to actually do the brand strategy of seeing what your values are is actually starting from where your values are not. Because like, for example, then we had a client who's like, they were literally always talking about customer service.
Yeah.
It was a manufacturing company. And when we talked to the employees, it was actually true. Like it's in the CEO's DNA, like the customer service part, they go over and beyond. And they lose tons of money because of that. So their products are not the lowest. So, but when it comes to customer service, they had that down. So I think to kind of figure, because a lot of like people say, oh yeah, we have great price, great service, and great product. Like that can't be true, right? Like obviously you can't. Like a lot of I actually found a lot of agencies do that when I first started. I shopped around in different agencies, and every agency says like, yeah, we're gonna be under budget, under like on time, and deliver like you can't have all three.
No, but I think the difference may be between, nothing is perfect ever, but I think for me, it's always been important that brand strategy is right after a business strategy. Like it's as high up in the hierarchy you can get. Like, so when you understand that this is going to drive the whole business, then you also need to work with people on the C-suite level. And this is where it's getting difficult for a lot of designers specifically, but creatives. Because if you don't have any business background, you don't know how to speak to business people, you don't know how to facilitate, then you will automatically not be trusted the same way. So that's why, for me, this human-centered way of really actually talking to people in the company, make sure that I can talk about leadership and culture too. I can educate people, but also I have really the trust from my client to talk to their customers too, and to really go deep into interviews and observation studies and things. And this is where we starting to get like totally I'm worried about the future of brand strategy because people start to think ChatGPT is instead of research. And it's totally crazy because it gives extremely generic insights. Insights doesn't come from old data or from ChatGPT. Insights, like, you have to really understand people's behavior. And for doing that, you need to talk to real people, even if many people think it's scary. So this is where I'm maybe more of almost like a UX UI kind of researcher that way, that I studied behavior because I think brands is all about actually make us feel something.
Yeah, I agree. You talked about how like you have to build a relationship with the clients, the executives. I find that a lot of people in our industry, creative people,
Yeah.
they're not really people person. So
Yeah.
and like a lot of them have ego. They're great at their job, but they just don't like. Before you said about like almost like coaching, right? Because if I go to my a CEO or CMO and be like, hey, you guys are doing this wrong, and but this is why it's not working. Like obviously they're not
Yeah.
gonna they're
No.
not gonna be like, oh, tell me, son, like that. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna it's gonna bounce right off of them, right? So
Yeah.
you do have to have that a little bit of that coaching, like you like kind of making it seem like they came up with the idea and all of that, right?
I mean, I think it also
So,
depends on how big group you work with, because I met hundreds of creative groups in Sweden when I was a CMO. And I can say that, I mean, that strategy, that you're creative, those things are like, there's expected. You just need to have it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that how many times we say no to an agency because we just don't like them. And people don't say that when you ask for feedback, but it's like, damn big egos, like, how can I ever work with these people? So if you work alone as a freelancer,
you mean from as a client?
As a client perspective,
Yeah.
when I was a client, yeah. So because I've been on both sides, I'm the consultant, but I've also been the client. So when I was a CMO, and also I was a chief brand officer too, I was there for a multi-billion-dollar brand called Lantmännen in Sweden. So I had 7 agencies at the same time. So I met hundreds of agencies from, DDB, McCann, really big ones, to really, really small freelancers. So hundreds of them. So I know how many people struggle with even just presenting themselves, pitching an idea, showing up. So people think it's all about the creative idea, or, it's a lot about being a people person who actually listen into the client and like, what is the client's problem here? And let them actually speak and give you that problems for you to solve, instead of telling them what you want to do before you even know the problem to solve.
Yeah. Like I think that's why. Like if you watch, I don't know if you watch Mad Men. You ever
Yeah,
watch Mad
I
Men?
have done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Don Draper, and then like his boss, the gray hair guy, he's like the account person. I think that's why agencies need, or they have account person, because like
Yeah.
like you, like whenever you just put a creative like directly with
Yes.
clients, I feel like there's clash that happens.
Yes, and that's
Would you
why it's
agree?
difficult. I agree, totally agree. That's why it's difficult for a lot of people to work on their own with clients, because then you need to wear like 4 different hats. Because the account person, that is the person who's the people person. That's the one who actually makes sure that the client have a good relationship with. But it could also be a
Or
very
even
good
sell
strategy.
it
It needs
the
to be.
strategy to them.
Yes, it needs to be the one who's really good at presenting the strategy and the ideas, because that is the one who's going to be a very good salesperson. Could also be a strategist in one and the same person. But then it's often a creative director. And here's where the more of the sometimes challenging egos and stuff comes in, because that person also comes in with a creative team, and they have ideas about what they want to do and how they want to solve it. And it's not always aligned with the client. So the account person is really important to be there as a representative. So when if you listen to this and you are a a freelancer, a solopreneur, and you come in and you work with a client, now you need to be all of this. You need to be the person who facilitate and find the right, discover the right problem. You need to be building rapport with the client. You need to be a good salesperson, good at presenting things, and very creative. And it's not easy to wear all these hats.
Yeah, it's because like, in the agency that I worked in, there's always also a friction between the account team and the creative team too.
Yes.
Because like there has to be some compromise that's made. And if you just leave it up to the creative team, they would make zero compromise, right? And if you leave it up to the account person, they'll make every compromise that the client wants. So there has to be some sort of a tension there that finds the middle. But if you do it by yourself, let's say you're a freelancer or you're a small agency owner, you kind of have to do it. You have to wear both those hats, the good cop and the bad cop. I think that's where a lot of creative people struggle.
Yes, it is difficult. And I can tell you one thing now when you say that, I think this is the reason why a lot of people who are a really good brand identity designers, and then they learn how to do brand strategy, after a while, a lot of them actually start to bring in designers to do the brand identity instead. And I think I know why, which I think is pretty smart. Is because you don't want to be like in love with your own idea. You need to detach from your idea, because as a strategist, you're looking for the big problem to solve. But then when you work with someone else, you can let that person really be, creative and go all in with that. But that person will have an attachment to their own ideas. So when I meet that person as a strategist, I can be very objective and we can talk about if this really solves the problem. That person will be more emotional because it's their baby. So sometimes it's actually really difficult to be both the strategist and the one who's the designer.
Yeah, I actually think it's nearly impossible. Like I've met very few people who can actually do both. Usually, like most people that I meet, they wear one hat or the other. You know what I mean? And and that kind of self-awareness is important, like which one you are, because some people are that creative person. That means they should probably bring in an account person or somebody who can deal with, who can play the game.
What I find, what I find when I teach creatives brand strategy is that a lot of people have so many assumptions from start. First of all, most people don't even know what it is, so that's the first problem. But after that, it's like, but I'm not a good facilitator. I'm shy. I'm introverted. I don't like meeting strangers. So there are a lot of fear. And I always, this is my best part, is that I love seeing people in the transformation, because I always tell them, you know what? The best facilitators I know are introverts, are actually kind of shy. And you know why? Because they're really good at listen and they're really observant and they make people feel seen and heard. And a lot of extroverts who talk too much become just a big ego who want to be, in the spotlight themselves and shine. But it's all about making the client feel like they're the one who's the hero who can shine. So for me, when that people start to realize that about themselves, like, oh my God, I'm actually a really good facilitator. I have the tools now. I know how to do it. Like to see that in people's eyes, how they grow and how they have confidence going into a room and start facilitating is like, it warms my heart.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's like introverts, I think I think they did a study and like 2/3 of like the top CEOs turned out to be introverts or something like that. But there's also there's that part, but there's also like kind of the ego part where, like you said, most of the times we have to, as a good leader, you have to make it seem like your designers came up with the idea, your copywriters came up with the idea, even if it's your idea, or your clients came up with the idea. You have to you have to make them feel like they came up with the idea, so they'll own the project, right? And a lot of creatives cannot do that, because I feel like a lot of creatives have that ego, which I also think is necessary to do creative work.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of creatives have that ego, and they want that credit. They want to let people know that that was my idea.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And to be honest, when I was on the client side, I did not really care so much about the ego for the creative team. I just wanted the best. And I knew a lot of times the best people were really difficult to work with. But that's also why you want to have your account person or your strategist in the team, because you don't really have to deal with them.
Yeah.
But I wanted that tension. I wanted someone to be a little difficult because I wanted them to perform the best creative solution. I didn't care about the rest. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they should be credited for if they do good work. They can get awarded. They can get a lot of cred.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that the people who are the strategists.
Maybe it's cultural difference. I mean, obviously, like the higher you go in a corporate ladder, I think the less ego people actually have. They're more about the result, and they're more about because I don't think you can really move up in an organization if you have too much ego.
Really?
But yeah, it's actually from my experience, it's the middle managers that have the most egos.
Okay, yeah, but I also
the billionaires that I meet,
okay,
actually are kind of like you in the sense that I don't care who gets the credit.
yeah.
I just want I just want results, right? Like those are the ones that are at the executive C-suite. But usually the director and the manager level is where I face a lot of the ego problem, where they're like, where, and I don't maybe it's a cultural difference, but here in the US, there's that's where like a lot of office politics happens. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think also people are scared, and which I can empathize with, because if you're making the wrong decision, you can get fired. You know, so that being scared also sometimes make people make really stupid decisions. You know.
yeah, I've definitely been. It's one of the reasons why I kind of like stepped away from the corporate world and do more personal brands.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you. I don't like the corporate world at all. I don't do work with corporates anymore right now, at least for a reason. I could maybe consider going in and doing like a 1 week sprint or a 1 day workshop, but to work with someone over years and really like creating a change,
because they will throw
you
under the bus, like they, you know what I mean? They will kind of backstab you and like. So let's move on to the personal brand side.
Yeah, that's more fun.
So before you talked about like how some people might say one thing about themselves, like I'm an environmentalist, but act not so different. And when you talked about how you want to be kind of completely transparent. So just like in the corporate world, there's a disconnect between what the executive thinks they are and what like it happened with Uber in the early days, right? Like Uber CEO was so toxic that like whenever like I feel like the CEO's personality and DNA gets trickled down to the rest of the organization, and the only way they could have really fixed that is to replace the CEO. So I feel like that happens also in personal brand world, where most personal brands that I work with, they are not who they say are. Actually, most people that I talk to, they are not who they say they are, or even think they are. It's almost like they're lying to themselves, right? Like, oh, I'm a passionate, kind person, but then when you look at their actions, they're clearly not. You know, like things like that. So would you say that work maybe still needs to happen in personal brand?
I mean, I think, and this is something that I'm on that journey myself and been for a couple of years, even though I'm 50, you know, I think it takes time for people to get to know ourselves, because I agree with what you said, but I also think it's a lot of people who do it subconscious. I don't think they are even aware of it. I
Yeah.
think
No, I agree. Yeah.
the
They lie to
self-awareness,
themselves.
yeah, the self-awareness is so really low.
Yeah.
So you actually don't know. You have a picture of yourself, and it's also because of social media. We just show up in a way that we want the world to see us. Maybe not you and me. Maybe we are a little bit different in a way, because I feel constantly that I post things that I'm like, this is goes against everything that people would recommend me to do. I just want to discover who I am and accept myself for who I am, and I do that in public. And if people hate me for that, oh great, then I don't have to be around them anymore. And I feel such a freedom of actually doing this, because I spend most of my life, of my 50 years, of pleasing people. I'm trying to fit in. Conscious sometimes, subconscious sometimes. I'm just really good at pleasing people so they like me. So I kind of have to be very, very aware all the time about who am I? How do I want to show up? What's important for me? And who do I want to surround myself with? So it's a constant journey of self-discovery, self-acceptance. I haven't maybe come to self-love yet, but I start to feel a little bit like I kind of like myself, and it took a long time.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means, that word self-love. I've never actually struggled, like unlike most people like in this industry, I've never
Yeah.
struggled with like self-love, or kind of
Mm.
I guess whatever, like self-esteem issue.
Okay.
um
Okay. Interesting.
yeah, that's something that I haven't really like deal with a lot. So it's hard for me to imagine like what does self-love look like,
Hmm.
because like I don't hate myself.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, so if we go into self-esteem, how
Yeah.
do you define self-esteem if you compare it to self-confidence? Do you have different
I
definition of those
I
two?
guess I thought it was the same thing.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'm not a pro here, so I don't know, but the way I have got it explained to me and the way I think about it is self-esteem is who I am. Self-confidence is what I do. So having self-confidence is also like the ability to think that I can actually accomplish things and do things. I've always had kind of a high confidence in that, because I think I can accomplish things when it comes to my work. But then when you remove that mask of me in my professional setting,
Yeah,
like the
if I
way,
take everything away, like
yeah, the way we
all your,
just,
yeah.
yeah, the way we just talked, put me in a boardroom or in front of a client and you will see a very confident person. But then put me here on social media somewhere where I remove that mask and I'm just Anneli, then it's about me knowing who I am and actually think I'm worthy of
That's true. Yeah,
something,
I see what you mean.
and how I feel about myself. And that's a different thing. And my
Yeah,
self-esteem
I
have
think I
always been
struggle a
low.
little bit more with self-esteem.
Mm.
So now that you put it that way, like like would I
Yeah.
still have the same amount of confidence if I didn't have the experience, the
Yeah.
titles and all of that, like
Yeah.
credibility and authority and all of that? Probably not.
And who we are when we just show up,
Mm,
and and also to kind of lean into, and this is something that I've been struggling with so much and still do, but I it's so easy to find the things that you think is your strength, and then you want to people to see you that way.
mm,
But then there are things that are your weaknesses that you want to hide for people, because it doesn't feel attractive at all. So you just want to hide it. And what I come to realize, with a lot of help and support from Christo on my journey, has been that what if your actually biggest strength, your gift, what is that? Maybe that's in your weakness, what you think is your weakness.
yeah, I agree.
And that's
Yeah.
been so interesting. So that's been a journey of me leaning into accepting that I'm messy as hell. I have ADHD. I'm a highly sensitive person. sometimes I have difficulty be short and concise when I express myself or say things. I have 1 million thoughts at the same time. There are so many things that I felt shame of. When it comes to myself, my appearance, I'm like, I'm 50, I'm overweight. I didn't want to show up in public because I was like, oh, they're just going to say that she's old and fat and what is she doing here? There was so many things around that I feel like I just want to hide. I don't want to put myself out there. So I was almost willing to not go after my dream because it was so difficult to face myself.
What was that dream?
My dream is to be on really big stages. Like, I want to be famous. I couldn't even say that. In my culture, you can't say that you want to be famous or you want to be on a stage. That's like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, calm down, So, but I want to do that. The reason why I want to do it is because I want to help and support and empower so many people. And if I'm not allowing myself to shine and stepping out there, no one will even know who I am.
Yeah.
So they need to see this in me, that you're also scared. I'm scared. You're doing it. I can do it. And I'm there and I'm empowering people to do the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because like here it's the same thing. People like nobody says, "Oh, I want to be famous," right? Like, I think we're just taught culturally, socially, we're taught not like, I don't want to be famous, I don't want to be rich, or I don't care about money. Like, those are things that are so wired into us.
Yeah.
And I think we honestly, truly, 100% in our heart believe that we are. But
Yeah.
if you actually break through that barrier, like, you have to. That's a good example of actually so many of those things that we think we are, but we're actually not, and that the disconnect between who we think we are versus who we really are. And I think for personal brands, like, we really need to get to that, right? Like, who are you really? And I love how you said, like, starting with your weaknesses.
Yes, because I think that when we put things out there, like, have you tried that sometimes when it's like something that you don't want people to know about you, and then you just tell it, and it's like, what else can they say now? You already put it out there. It's like the elephant in the room. Just bring it up, and now it's, no one can say anything. Comedians are really good at doing this. They're just showing up on stage and like, oh, now you're like, oh my God, he was really short. I thought he was so tall. Then it's like, that's the elephant in the room. If they don't address it, everyone will tell. Like, think about it.
That's true.
So it's kind of the same thing but
it's like a pressure off,
it is. And when you put yourself in those situations and you actually share about what your struggles are, then you just imagine how many people who feel the same way. Like, we think everyone have everything figured out. Most people don't. Most people feel like this. They're like, when am I going to be exposed? I don't know enough. Like, most people feel like that.
So do you work with personal brands? Do you coach like personal brands and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, because I do coach creatives mostly. I have some CEOs that I coach too. But I do focus right now most on creatives. And so it started with me teaching brand strategy, but I always knew that is kind of just a skill. But that doesn't really give you the total transformation, because if you want to transform into a different role in your career, it's so much more. First of all, maybe you need to just believe in yourself and know that you can actually do this. And then you need to have someone who believes in you until you believe in yourself, and who can help you with maybe overcome things that you feel is really difficult. And then you need to show up and find your voice and position yourself in this new role so you can actually attract clients. So I think of just identifying who you are and then how you show up. That is personal branding, right? I just haven't said to people, yeah, I'm doing personal branding now.
Oh,
But
okay, got it.
it kind of turns into that, and it's also very close to my heart.
Yeah, I think that's the core. Like unless you know yourself, like like in a vulnerable way.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be hard for you to like voice that outside into the world. Yeah.
Okay, I'm really curious. Can I just ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Is that okay? Okay. I'm curious because you are a guy. You and I met one time before, not on air, and I instantly liked you. We talked for a while, and I was a little bit nervous, to be honest, because I thought he was so almost a little scary because you were so confident and you're like, fuck, like, oh, they're like really cool guys. I'm like, oh, I don't know. So, but then I realized so fast that this is a really like, oh my God, this guy has a big heart, and I instantly liked you.
Maybe I have this connection between my brand and the real me.
So my question is like, do you have a weakness that you feel like you leaning into that has become your strength?
Yeah, I have a lot. So actually, when you were talking about the weakness before, one thing that when you were talking about how you were messy, so that's one of my weaknesses is that, so I'm a huge procrastinator, and I'm impulsive and I'm messy. So what ends up happening is a lot of times in the middle of a project, let's say we have a 3-month project and 6 weeks in, we actually find a better way to do something. And I'll scrap and I'll say, no, now that we know this, now that we have a better idea, we have to do it, even though it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
And I piss a lot of people off, or like because I waited that long or something like that. And things like that happen to me a lot, where like few days before a deadline, I'll have something new or something like that. And if I look back, those were some of the key ideas that I've come up with, or we've come up with, that completely changed our agency and like even my life, right? Like some of the biggest achievements that I made came from those last minute changes. So if I saw that as a weakness, I'm like, I shouldn't procrastinate. I should plan everything. I should, and I should stick by my plan and not be so impulsive, right? That would actually that would have hurt me in my career. Yeah. Because that weakness was actually turned out to be my strength. Like, if you like, that's why I think the weakness and strength thing is so important, because like you can't be creative and kind of organized at the same time. People are like, oh, I'm a good businessman. I'm organized. I meet deadlines. Blah blah blah. Like I'm terrible at meeting deadlines, by the way. So like I always have like even our project manager in my own agency sets deadlines that are further away, and he won't tell me the real deadline because he knows I'll miss it, right? Yeah. So but that's like one of my strengths, and that I am like that, because I do think that to be creative, you have to be spontaneous. You have to be impulsive. Like that personality comes with creativity. So if you're the person that are like organized and everything meets deadlines and to-do lists and everything just by the book, like that by definition means you're not very creative. You're a rule follower. Do you know what I mean? So you can't have both, right? So that is why I think at the end, your weakness is your strength. And in my community, because they're all personal brands, one of the first exercise we do for new members, as well as like repeatedly, is I ask them to find their weaknesses. We start with the weaknesses, and then try to find out what our strength is. And every time I do this exercise, and I am this way, by the way, also, like I'm also human as well, obviously. I'm not a robot. Every time I do this exercise, most people actually don't even know what their real weakness is. And, because people will say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a workaholic, or, that kind of whole thing. And even if they do think they know, like when I know I've got it, is when they can go really vulnerable. And and usually that thing is the one thing that, you ever have somebody that's like, okay, I'll give myself as an example. So growing up, like, I was always very naive. I trust people very easily.
Yeah.
And I used to get scammed all the time. Like, I get ripped off, like, from people, and then, like, I lend people stuff and they never give it back, and I don't do anything about it. Like, I'm just like, I'm too trusting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mom used to tell me that, son, like, you'll never succeed in business. People will people will scam you, and you're like, you know, like, you're just too naive, like, you know. And my mom's not the only person that's told me this. My closest friends have told me this. My wife tells me this now, you know, like, you're too nice and all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about, right? Like, that. It's usually the thing that people around us, the closest to us, our family, our friends, are telling us, like, son, you're so like this. Son, don't get so emotional. Like, calm down, son. Like, you're too emotional. Or like, son, you're too naive. Or, son, like, that thing that I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yes.
Like, I usually that's the real weakness.
Yeah.
From what I've experienced. So once we get to that part, then I know we're going somewhere. You know?
So what do you think, just to go a little bit deeper in that, because that is still like, okay, so you're naive, you know that, but
I'm impulsive too.
So what do you think is the reason for you being naive?
I forget very easily. I don't hold grudges.
Okay.
So if somebody backstab me, like
you forget about it.
A couple of days later, I won't even remember it. Like,
really?
I don't. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So, like, somebody can scam me over and over and over again. I'll get fooled every time.
Oh wow. That is so interesting. I'm the opposite. I do remember for the rest of my life. Oh, that's so interesting. So I just think this is so, because now you also talked a little bit about more things that are connected a little bit to work and how you show up in work. But do you have anything when it comes to your, like, to you, if you remove your work and your work identity, do you have a weakness that is connected to who you are as a person that you feel is something that?
Yeah, I think all those weaknesses also shows up in my. I don't think, like, especially on personal brands, but like even in your career in corporate brands, I really don't believe in that there's a work you and then home you. Like, I think whatever your personality is at home with your friends is gonna show up at work, and the same vice versa. I a lot of times, like, the stories that I tell, because I teach storytelling and branding. When I hear stories of, like, me related to work and some sort of a personal story, and people are always saying, yeah, but those are like, how do I use this for work? But I'm like, it's the same story, because I'll give you an example. This is how naive I am, right? This is one of the reasons why my mom. So when I was young, my dad used to pay me and my sister $10 to wash the car. And what I did was I spent like 2-3 hours, like, washing the car down to its details, like, so perfectly.
Yeah.
And then I spent the $10 that I got paid to go buy an air freshener for the car. Because I wanted to, like, make it perfect, right? So I basically wash the car for free, right? And that personality, that's a personal story, right? It's not a work story.
Yeah.
But also shows up at work, because I remember the first project I worked on, it was for a friend of mine, and she paid me $1,700 to do a e-commerce website, a Yahoo store, and this was like in the early 2000s. So, like, I had to write all the JavaScripts myself. Like, I had to do everything from scratch, and it took me 9 months, like, full time, working on this full time. So I made $1,700 in 9 months, right? And like, that same personality also shows up here, right?
Yes. Yes.
And at that time, people around me were like, "Son, what are you, stupid? Like you're like you don't really understand business, right? And profits and blah blah blah." But that happened a few times, right? That happened, and then it happened again. Like I have projects in our agency where we've lost money on, but usually those are the projects that got me the bigger clients later, the high paying projects later, because that was in my portfolio. Do you understand what I mean? So it helped me.
Yeah.
So I just think that my personal personalities in my personal life also shows up in work and vice versa.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It made total sense. I think I was more into like, when we talk about self-esteem and self-confidence, that was more like the self-esteem is more how we think about ourselves, like how we feel about ourselves, and the other is more how we feel about our performance, or how we show up in work. And sometimes I think we're like, I had things that I wasn't aware of. This is like things that I feel a little bit shame of. But I think it's important to talk about things like this because not so many people do. And there are a lot of people out there who feel lonely because they see all these perfect people online and they look up to and they think they have everything figured out. And that's why they don't want to step out in the spotlight, because who am I to do that when everyone else is so perfect? I'm definitely not perfect. So I can share one thing that I have a picture of myself because I like prototyping and be creative in coming up with ideas. So I had an idea about myself that I'm so like fast mover. I'm always like trying things. It doesn't have to be perfect. You but do a shitty first draft. That's how I teach people. Then it comes to myself. And I'm like, there's a story from when I was younger, because that's often when we hear things in our head comes from a parent or something. That I was into sports, and my dad always said, I don't think he wanted to hurt us. He loved us, but it was just his way of being very competitive. So it's like, coming number 2, coming second is the first loser. It's so in my head. So whatever I do, I really want to do it really well from start. So going back now to just like 2 years ago, I had a conversation. I did a thing that I really feel shame for, but I can tell it because it's so connected to this. It's about me don't want to look stupid in front of people, me wanting to show up and already be behaving and be ready as a famous person, but I'm not. I'm not yet, I'm still training myself. So I'm going to do a podcast with Christo for the future podcast. And we misunderstand each other. We know each other back then pretty well too, but we misunderstand each other. So Greg, who worked as a producer, booked me and he said, Anneli, I want to hear about your personal brand, your journey, everything. And I was like, cool, I'm happy to share, I lit some candles, like relax. It was like 11 in the evening, working like for 15 hours. I was so tired, but I'm like, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to talk about myself. It's kind of good that I'm relaxed and a little tired. And Chris and I meet on Riverside like this. And he's like right into it. He's like, okay, cool. Let's talk about brand strategy and brands. How do you define brand? And I was like, what? And he thought that he was going to do an episode with me about brand strategy and brands. And he went straight into it. And he asked things about, okay, so give me some examples, some case studies. And I was like, I don't know what happened. My brain just totally shut down. I couldn't remember anything. I didn't know how to define anything. I could not say any case study whatsoever. We had to take a break when he's like, and I think you meant Patagonia with that story, but you said North Face. I'm like, what did I? It was so embarrassing. I could not sleep the entire night. I reached out to him and I was like, I'm fucked. I'm sorry for my language, but I'm like, I don't want you to show that for anyone because no one will ever trust me and I'm just a freaking idiot. And he's like, we're not, I'm not doing anything that you don't want to. Do you want to record it again? How do you feel? Like he was super, compassionate to me and empathetic. So, but I was so filled of shame. So even now, 2 years later, I still have like a trauma of, I haven't done another podcast about me with him yet, because I have such a trauma of me showing up and only get one chance, and then people going to be impressed by me. I'm going to have all the answers, and if I fuck up, no one will ever work with me ever, and they will just think that I'm an incompetent middle-aged woman from Sweden. Like, what is she doing here? So that's going on in my head, and I think that's connected to that thing of, you need to win or you're the first loser. And it's so deep inside of me. So myself, like my story about myself,
that's the self-esteem part.
And my story about myself was like, oh, I'm so like go with the flow, and I can just like wing it, and I don't have to be perfect, but the reality was, I couldn't even say I don't know, because I felt so much shame of not having the answers to everything. So that's one example how I really have held myself back and felt like I need to know everything. And if I don't, people will not trust me.
So how did you get from there to, like, how did you overcome that?
I don't even know if I overcome it, to be honest, because I think just talking about it, just voicing it, like we said, about all weaknesses, about everything that is scary, because I think a lot of people feel the same way. So in this example, Chris told me, he's like, have you noticed that I say I don't know a lot? I'm like, you never say I don't know, you know everything. He's like, no, I say I don't know a lot. And then I started to listen to that, and I actually hear him say I don't know a lot. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I never noticed. So now I hear a lot of people that I trust and look up to say, I don't know a lot. So who the hell can have all the answers to anything? Like, no one expects that. So that's kind of how I try to get over things, is like also disproving it. I have a belief about something, and then I have to disprove myself that that belief is not true. That's kind of exercises that I need to do, and constantly. And I did a list just the other day about beliefs that I had to disprove myself. So I'm not over it. I'm in the middle of it, and I'm just, maybe this will be for the rest of my life. Maybe this is just a journey of being in the spotlight, to constantly have to work with yourself, check in with yourself, and like, hey, are you showing up as your true self right now? What is holding you back? And to work on that.
Yeah. I resonate with that story so much, because like I feel that way too. Like even when I go on podcasts now, or when I do my coaching or whatever it is, I constantly feel like I need to provide some sort of value, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if I don't provide value, then why would this client pay me, or why would this person come to my webinar? Or like, why? If I don't, like, just me myself isn't enough. Like, it has to be me with this knowledge, or without this knowledge, without this value, or without this title, without this, like kind of like reaching out. Like, here's a simple one, like reaching out to people and asking them to be on my podcast. And I feel like I have to have certain number of followers.
Oh, really?
In order for me to ask somebody. Otherwise, why would they come on my podcast? Like subconsciously, I'm telling myself I'm not good enough. That's why I need X number of followers for somebody to come on my podcast. Like, do you understand what I mean?
I totally, I totally see what you mean. And I also do feel that sometimes about like what we provide. But then I have to go back to myself and think, that Maya Angelou quote, when it's like, people don't remember what you say, people remember how you make them feel. I think it's something about that when it comes to podcasts too. Like, are we really sure that everyone who listens to a podcast always want to have like the big learning lesson, the big takeaway? What if they just enjoy taking a walk, listening in to us, feels like they're a part of a conversation, connect with us and not feel lonely, feel like they're actually just like I am and feel empowered in that. Maybe that is the most important thing sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like when I go to a Journey, like I love Journey.
Mm,
When I go to a concert, like I know all the songs. I'm not learning anything new.
yeah.
I'm paying like a couple
Hmm.
$100 just to go there and listen to the same songs that I already know. So yeah, I think there's some truth to that. Like I just want to, like, just that person's presence is good enough or something like that.
And maybe this is also where we're different, right? Because like Gary Vee, he talks in these like perfect little, short things that you can cut down to shorts and reels, and they become perfect because he knows how to talk about his message that way because he's a, content creator. There are a lot of people who are really short and concise in how they express themselves, for example, and they
Mm-hmm.
want to teach something. But it doesn't mean that I have to be like that. That's what I've been thinking a lot about. But because
Mm-hmm.
my strength is to show up with being me and being vulnerable and being sensitive and emotional and showing who I am. That's how I connect deeply with people. And if that is something that I want to help people to actually find their voice and to show up and be okay with who they are and build their personal brand on that, if I don't allow myself to do that, if I always have to teach or be so short and concise, is
Mm-hmm.
that really true to who I am? Because I'm a verbal
Mm-hmm.
processor. I love hugging people. Like if you and I would meet, we're just like, I am that way, So why not show up like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's not just Gary Vee, but like almost every reels I watch, and I'm like, oh, these people are so eloquent, and yeah, you're right. Like I think that. So, what do you think about that whole? So, how does that play into like brand messaging and marketing? Because
Mm,
on one hand, like for example, I wanna put myself in the best light, right? Like
yeah.
I wanna show off awards that I've won, or that my agency has won, or I wanna show off like places that, because that does build credibility for the audience, and
Mm-hmm.
that does serve a purpose.
Yes.
Kind of like when you go into a job interview and say, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
went to this school or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
So in a world where we constantly have to sell ourselves like that,
Mm.
how do we balance that with the self-esteem of, "Ugh, like none of those things are me," right?
Yeah.
Like they're just stuff I've done. That do you know what I'm trying to
Yeah, I
say?
know what you mean. But also, I think we need to realize that people meet a lot of people all the time. And if we are a professional in our role and we show up, we also know that we have no like and trust, like that we always talk about with building
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
brands. So people need to know about us first. They also need to like us, so we vibe somehow, personality, and they also need to trust us. So we don't have so much time. So I think a lot of people would benefit from knowing exactly how to present yourself. You can call that, pitch or elevator pitch or presentation, whatever you want to do, introduction.
Mm.
But you need to know how to do that, and to be able to tell people who you are, what you do in a way that is not like a lingo that no one understand, you know, that normal people understand. You work with design. You're not an art director or a visual
Mm.
identity designer. Who the F know what that is if we're not in the industry? No
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
one. So you're this name, you work with design for this kind of companies. So what you help them do. But then, like you said, you also need to mention something. I've been doing this X amount of years, or I've been working with this kind of brands before, or we've been winning this award. That's just to build rapport and build trust. So people feel like, why should I listen to you? Why should I trust you? So I don't think it's anything
Yeah.
wrong doing that. It's just so people don't zoom out and start thinking about something else or doing something else. So we need to be able to do that too. I don't think that's in a conflict with actually showing up who you are and knowing yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think there's a difference between like I need this in order for me to feel confident versus I'm doing this because it's part of the job, and like that's how that's how I'm gonna get customers or get clients. And I actually think that because that can go the other way too. Like because I've also met somebody who's like, I don't want to, I don't want to show off. Like people who actually don't like selling themselves, right?
I mean,
Like,
I can feel that because I've been there myself. I still feel it's a little bit difficult to do that. Like I have much easier to talk about the things that I struggle with and everything I go through. Then I don't so often like name drop things like, oh, I've been working with Coca-Cola and Volvo and Levi's. So like a lot of big brands, I've awarded this and that. I don't do that. I should do it. I'm training myself to do it a little bit more because I know that people do care. So I've been maybe having a little bit higher volume of finding
I see.
myself and sharing my story, and maybe not so much of here's the badass consultant, this is what I've been doing, because I think people don't need to hear that, but they actually do need to hear it.
Yeah. I actually think that comes from the same insecurity. Like when I feel like I'm showing off
Yeah.
versus like I actually feel like I need to show off in order to be validated. I think those two things actually come from the same insecurity. Because if those things are not important to me and they need to be said in order to gain somebody's trust,
Yeah.
why do I have problems saying them? Right? Like, because I have that same, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But maybe when you said it, maybe it's like not show off, maybe it's show up.
What's the difference?
No, but show up is like show who you are and objectively tell people what you're about and what you have been doing. Yeah. Show off is like bragging about it.
Yeah. That's probably why personal brand is so much harder, in my opinion, because when you work with a corporate brand, you're so detached. It's kind of like I always say it to, like, if you're working in a movie and you're the writer or director or actor or whatever it is, and you get a bad review, that it's like it can be bad writing, it can be bad directing, like it doesn't all fall on you, right? Like it's like it was a team of hundreds of people who worked on this thing together, and I was part of that team. But if you're a stand-up comedian and you get criticized, or you get then literally they are criticizing you, like as a person, like your idea, your comedy, your face, whatever it is, they're criticizing you, and you're like, that's why it's so much harder for personal brands, because when somebody criticizes my personal brand, like they're criticizing me.
They are. I mean, they are, but the thing is, maybe this is where we started, that it's so important to do the self-work to reach self-acceptance first. Because I know exactly how this feels. I'm very... I don't know if I'm actually am right now, but maybe it's happening a shift here. But I used to be very attached to my work. But I think, especially because I'm kind of in the middle of a launch right now, and I feel like I'm changing, because I know that when the industry has been a little bit like up and down, and it's a lot of challenges right now, and information products are a little bit more difficult to sell, and things happen. So what I realize now is that I put in the same effort. I bring the sorry, I would need some water. I don't have any water here. Okay, give me 2 seconds. I just need to edit this. I just started to cough. I don't know what it is.
Take your time if you want to grab water.
I don't have any water here. That's the problem. Okay, so see if I can. Okay, I start over. Okay, so I'm in the middle of the launch right now, and I realize that I'm doing the same things as I used to do, and I don't get exactly the same result. And then it's so easy to start beating yourself up. But then I have to take a few steps back and see what's going on in the industry right now. It's a little bit tougher selling information products. I have to reinvent myself a little bit, like you talked about. I do some changes. But actually, for the first time, I feel like I don't take it personally. I feel like I put in the hard work, I'm doing my best, and I can't do more than that.
You're more detached.
Yeah, I'm more detached. I don't judge myself. I'm like, okay, there are things going on here that I can't do anything about. I'm happy with what I contribute. I'm happy with my work. And no matter if 5 people or 500 people buy it, will not change how I feel about myself right now. And I think that's the first time ever in my life I feel like that.
Oh yeah, that's so important. Like it's like, I'm sure you went through that phase like as a designer too, because like I went through the phase where every time I submit my design to clients, and the client starts criticizing, like critiquing, they're like, "Oh, this is too this, blah 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 blah." Like every one of those felt like it was like a knife to my heart. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt like they're criticizing when they criticize my design. Like it felt like they were criticizing me, right? And my ego was so attached to that work.
Yes.
And then over time, when I started hiring designers, and I started critiquing, and like based on my conversation with the clients.
Yeah.
And I knew that none of those comments were personal, right? Like it was just like a solution to a problem, right? That's all that was. I started to actually realize that about myself. Like I'm like, oh, I'm way too attached to my designs, and my ego is way too attached. And so that was my first practice that, I guess, detaching myself from me, or like the results.
Yeah.
And like what you said is actually perfect, because that happens in content creation too, right? If one of your posts does really well and then the next one doesn't, you're like, what's wrong with me? And you get into that.
Yes. Oh my
People
God.
don't like me.
Yes. I'm such an emotional roller coaster. And I think that comes with us being emotional. It's also like we have to check in with ourselves even more than person that are not so emotional, because it's like high, low, lows all the time. And I'm like kind of easy to judge myself from how others perceive it. But I slowly feels that something is changing here, and I'm happy to feel that detachment a little bit more. And I'm also trying to really like when I go into that, I'm like, I have to remind myself, why do I do this? Especially when it comes to a personal brand. Like, I want to express myself, like, because now, and we also need to realize that I'm not doing client work so much anymore. I teach and coach. It's a little bit different thing. But for me, it's almost like I see myself as an artist, because I work for myself. I do this because I love creating content. I love helping creatives. But it's not, no one owns me. No one tells me what to do. I don't have a boss. I want to express myself. I don't want to be so attached to people. So if I do a good post or a bad post, I let that affect how I feel about myself. So I have to check in with myself constantly. Like, Anneli, do you do what you love? Like, do you follow your passion and your heart?
That's true.
Because that's what otherwise I could continue
It's the
to
whole
work with
reason why
client work.
yeah. It's the whole reason why you go into, working for yourself, is so
Exactly.
that you can have that freedom.
So you can have the freedom. So even if I had my company for 20 years, but when I did client work, I mean, when I say client, I mean like company work. When I did that, I felt always like, in a way, they owned me a little bit. Like I worked for them. But now when I coach and teach, creatives, it's actually me leading and showing up the way I want. And if people want that and like that, then they come to me. If they don't like that, I don't want to change so they will like me. That's the difference.
I actually think that same mentality applies with clients, because I used to always think that, like, at first, when I was like when I was working for a company, I was like, oh, once I start my own agency, like, then I can do what. And then once I got my agency, like, clearly it wasn't like, instead of one boss, now I have 20 bosses,
Yes,
right? Like,
exactly.
and then I'm like, oh, once I have a product, then like, it never really went away. Do you know what I mean? So I think at the core, if you can't fix it within you, whatever that you trying to chase approval or validation or something like
Yes.
unless you can fix that in the core, I don't think changing a job makes a difference. Like, I think people can work in a 9-to-5 job and still feel like they don't, they're free.
Yes,
If that makes
because
sense.
as long as you need someone else to validate you and to say that you're worthy, to say that you're enough, as long as you need that, you're not free.
That's true. We just have to be enough as is.
Exactly.
No matter what. Yeah. No matter what. And I actually think we'll do the best we do. Like, actually, you know what you made me realize is that for me, my business is always did well, or even like my social media or whatever, once I became detached. So like, and another way I usually say it is, once things start getting boring, because I feel like in the in the beginning of my career, my job, I was trying so hard. I was like, I'm so passionate. Need to show everybody how passionate I am, and I need to constantly prove myself, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I was overdoing it. That it didn't. I was going in circles. Like, even in the beginning of my agency, like, I would look like, oh, I need to do this, and I changed direction, and I changed directions too much because I was too passionate and too emotional and too attached, that I didn't give something enough time for it to mature. I would be like, oh, no, that's not working. Let me try this. Oh, no, that's not working. You know what I mean? So like, my business was kind of struggling in the beginning because I was too attached. And then there came a time when I kind of became detached. I'm like, okay, this agency Night Owl is not me. It doesn't define me as a person. And I had to kind of detach a little bit. And I say, oh, I'm just doing this because I have clients and I have to pay the bills. And so I went in and I did the work day after day after without overthinking it, right? Like, just kind of like, not taking anything personally. And that's when my agency started to grow.
Wow.
And the same thing happened with social media. Like, in the beginning, I was like, keep changing niche, keep changing direction. Like, it wasn't working. Like, I'm like, oh, what happened there? And I was just overdoing it. But then once I became detached and I was just like putting out content consistently, like, just looking at the what works and what doesn't work, making those. That's when it started growing. And it's just like, that's happened in my life over and over and over again, where when I was too attached to something, when I want something too bad, even in a relationship, whenever I want something too bad, too attached, it never worked out. Once I detach, and I'm like, oh, I don't care. That's when actually things starts to work out.
It's the energy, like, it's desperate energy. It's not drawing anything to
it's
you.
out of desperation.
And desperate energy is not attractive. So, I mean, in a way that people are drawn to it or not. And so I think that's the thing. But so I have been struggling with it, and I still struggle with it a lot. But I do feel like, if I want to say something to people who start on social media, because a lot of people are really afraid of putting themselves out there and to be seen and heard. And I just tell them often, and this is maybe harsh, but it's like, I think it's just honest. It's like, how many people do you actually care about what you write about on social media? Most people will not even see you. They don't care. They care about themselves.
Yeah.
So if you're holding
And
back,
you'll never see them.
So exactly. So here you are holding back, not putting yourself out there because you think the whole world will judge you. Like, you would be happy if the whole world would look at you, because they will not. Most people will not even care. So instead of having expectations or, on that, or judging yourself, instead think about what will happen if I just start showing up a couple of times a week and I actually post something that gives me joy, that I learn something from actually writing something, because sometimes just expressing ourselves and writing something is the best learning. So if you do that and show up for yourself, like you said, when you started to do and not being so attached to it, that's often when even results start to happen. So we can't just show up and have expectations that we will get 3 new clients because you post 2 weeks. That will not happen.
I don't know how you feel, but I bet when your community members hear those kind of stories from you and see you being vulnerable, see you saying that, talking about, like, when you say, I don't know, just like when Christo says, I don't know, and you were inspired by him to be more vulnerable, you are probably inspiring your members, your community, to be more vulnerable. And I think that's so powerful. Like, I think vulnerability, authenticity just is contagious like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think I used to think that was a weakness. Like, I used to think that kind of I'm a little bit like a squirrel, like a little whimsy, like my personality of just kind of showing up as myself, and I don't have so much filter. I'm just like telling things that are embarrassing, or I share a story like that. I always used to get almost like a hangover, like an emotional hangover from that. I'm like, shoot, why did I tell that? Like, can someone just stop me before I say things like that? But now I start to realize that kind of my personality is actually what often connects deeply with people. So instead of like feeling shame of being like that, I try to embrace that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think that's self-love.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
like,
Yeah.
as you're saying that, now I remember, because it's been so long for me. But I remember when I was younger, I had what you just said happened so much, where I'll be with my friends and I'll say something, I'll make a joke, I'm like, and all night I'm like, "Oh, why did I say that? Like, I should have said this," or, you know what I mean, like, or I should have just kept my mouth shut. Like,
Yeah.
that used to happen to me so much, and at some point it disappeared. I don't know when, and it's been so long that I haven't really thought about it. But I think that was my journey of maybe what you say, self-love. Is now when I say something like that, I don't think twice, because maybe I came to accept that that's me, that's who I am. And actually, like, a part of it is watching myself on video a lot.
Yes.
Because I remember when I first started watching myself on video, it used to be so cringe.
Yes. Oh my
I'm like,
God.
oh,
Yes.
why did I say that? Blah blah blah. But just repeatedly watching it and editing my own videos over and over and over and over, and it's gone to a point where I'm like, oh, I sound pretty good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I remember that we were back on Clubhouse days, a couple of years ago when the pandemic, and we were on Clubhouse like all the time. And I was so nervous. I could not even, the first time we were on Clubhouse, we were Mo, Drigo, and Chris and I scripted everything.
Oh, I know all those people.
Chris was so generous to me that he just said, you just show up and do your best thing. And if you don't want to talk, you don't talk. I'm here. I can't even believe how much he helped me from start. But I scripted and they didn't say anything. They're such a sweethearts. They could have made fun of me, or they could have been like, oh, here she comes with a script. I didn't know any other way to do it because I was so afraid of speaking English in front of people. So I had to script it. I had to script it because of my English. I also had to script it because I was so damn nervous. So here I was, like 46 years old, had a long career where I had used to be confident speaking Swedish, being in front of C-suites, even being a C-suite myself. And I was confident. And now I'm put in a situation, and this is what happens when all of us pivot sometimes and do things in life. New language, new culture around people where I felt like I don't know how to produce content. They do know how to do this. And I was just totally a beginner again and had so much anxiety. So that's how it started. And Chris said, you need to go back and listen to yourself. I'm like, hell no, I'm not listening to that recording. But I started to do that. So now I'm actually able to go back. I can listen to podcast recordings. I can listen to my own teaching. I'm trying to be very objective. I take notes and I can see where I can improve. But it doesn't affect how I feel about myself. And that's been such a long journey. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that I'm not up and down, because I'm still, some days I'm top of the world and other days I don't even go up from bed because I hate myself. But I think that's another issue. I don't know what that is, but it's
I haven't even thought of, like you said, for a non-native speaker, that's an extra hurdle that you have to go through that, like, I didn't have to worry about. So that's like,
but don't think about to show up and not just talk. It's difficult to have a conversation with people when it's not your first language. Now you're showing up on stage. When we did some of the rooms of Clubhouse, I did one room with my friends from Snask, an agency in Sweden, and Chris. We had like 12 or 1,300 people in the rooms. I was like, what? That was crazy. So you're on stage with your second language, and you're also nervous, and you show up as yourself, and you're not hiding behind like an agency or a company. It's just me. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit easier to just have audio, because at least people didn't have to see me. But so it's been such a difficult journey. And I can share another short story that I realized how many other people struggle with that. So I'm going with the future Euro tour. Chris and I decided I'm like, come to Stockholm and talk. And he's like, no, but I don't know if I only can go to Stockholm. I'm like, no, but let's do more countries in Europe. So we decided about 8 cities in Europe, and it became really big. So we were going to travel with each other. I known Chris for years then, and people from the pro community. But then it hit me. I need to go on an airplane, and I don't do that. I hate flying, and I haven't done it in 15 years, and I'm so afraid. That was one thing. Then it comes to my personal thing. I'm going to show up in person. What if people hate me? I mean, and also that was the first thing. I am the way I am, and I'm sensitive, and I could be emotional, and I have difficult sometimes to hold back my feelings. And on top of that, I just felt shame because I wanted to lose weight, and I was overweight, and I'm like, people would judge me, say like, oh, she's so much fat. She's fatter than I thought. Like, I had so many thoughts in my head. So I started to go on a diet like a month before, and I tried to lose weight, and I got totally emotional, about everything. Like, I don't want to show up. And I just felt so much pressure around this. And then I'm like, what if I share this with people? So I remember writing a story about it. Like, I think it's difficult to show up in person. And so many people reached out to me, not just women and men. And like, oh my God, thank you for bringing this up. I don't go to meetups. I don't show up and do things because I feel some people felt shame of being too thin or too fat or too tall or too long. Everyone have their own issues, right? And they just was so happy that I actually brought that up and said, I struggle with this, and I thought it was difficult for me. So that's just examples of
when was that?
It's is it like 2 years, 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, I mean it's especially true, but now I think because like after like COVID, we went to this like virtual world, and we've gotten so comfortable in that world and used to it that it made it really hard to go and like actually now face reality.
And face people that you just meet, because we met people and we follow people during the pandemic.
But you never met in person.
We never met in person, and we grow our audiences, and everyone start to know who you are, you know, and you're going places. And actually, if I go somewhere, there could also be a couple of people who go to a conference who actually know who I am. And all of a sudden it hits you that people just see this part of you. They never even seen me, you know, in full figure.
You're
and
like,
then
I'm going to be exposed.
Yes. And then everything start to be like, am I, you know, attractive enough? Am I this and that? And will they like the true me when they actually meet me in person and not just an hour on Zoom? You know, it was tough. But now I'm happy
I can imagine so many people have that. Yeah.
But I'm also
I
happy
have
to
that a little bit. Yeah.
You do? Yeah. So I think that now when I got through it and I traveled, I mean, we did our 8 cities, but I also traveled with Chris in other places now, latest in Canada and other people I know. And I also would say it's amazing to travel with people because you get to know people. You get to see the worst in people. Like you get to see, so you know each other so well. And if you still like each other, if you still accept each other, even though you can be really annoyed at each other, or you can, it's like, but you've seen everything and then you have nothing to hide. And that's how I want to feel with audience too. I'm like, I just want them to see the real me. And if that's not good enough, so be it, you know?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say is I think it's to build relationships, like you really have you know how like people like couples when they start dating and they go on their first vacation. Like that's when their true self comes out, and that's when they're going to get into their first fight and all of that, right? Like I do think that in order to build relationship, you do have to show yourself at your worst. Because that is the real you. And I almost feel like, just like in a relationship, I think branding is the same thing. Like, I don't think branding is like your mission statement and all of these, or your tagline and all these things that you say, even if that is a line, right? I think how your reputation as a brand really gets built is not about those things that you say, or, you know, but it's about, and it's not even about what you do when things are good. It's actually how you show up when things are bad. Like when a customer had a bad experience, how did you show up? Or when something when your flight got delayed, what happened then? Like, and in those worst moments, how you react, I think is what people really remember and they know you by. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes totally sense. And I think that's why personal branding is a little bit different than company branding. We can help to discover who we are, because we don't change. Like, we just need to know ourselves and accept ourselves. That's the first step. And to see, like, what is our true personality? Because sometimes people will perceive us. I mean, I know some people from start perceive me as very corporate, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm everything but corporate. But it was good to hear, because that was my brand for them. That's how they felt about me and perceived me. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have so much corporate pictures, whatever it is. Yeah. So you can always shape perception a little bit, but then I think you're right that everything is how we show up, but also we need to realize that we're human. And when you work with clients or you're amongst friends, whatever it is, it's like we can all mess up, and it's okay to also be able to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't show up.
Even that, I think, is part of it.
Yeah.
Because we all have friends that are like, that might say that, oh, I'm so dependable or something like that. And then let's say, you know, when shit hits the fan, like they disappear or something like that, right? And then they don't apologize, right? Then, like, in those moments, you find out who they really are. And then I
Yes.
think those are going to be the things that we find memorable, where we're like, oh, this person is like this. I don't care
Yes.
what he says. Like,
Yes.
because we all have that friend who's late all the time, right? We
Mm-hmm.
always have that friend that borrows money and never pays back. We always have that friend that's always on time.
Yes.
We always have that friend that's always asking me, hey, how are you doing? Like,
Yes.
those things you cannot lie. That you can't fix that with a brand statement or logo, right? Like, it's
No.
just how you show up
That
for a
is how
long
you
period of
show
time.
up. And I think we need to be aware of that as a personal brand. Our skills are just like what your clients expect from you to have. But people want to have fun when they work, and they want to trust you, and they want to work with someone who cares.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we miss out of a deadline, or we're doing something wrong, and we know that this was not good, instead of trying to kind of hide that or cover that, just own it. And it's like, I know I did a mistake. I'm so sorry. I will try to fix it. Be very straightforward and open, because we're just humans and all people do mistakes. But we also could own our mistakes and
Yeah.
apologize.
You know, I have a feeling that you're going to be the type of person where, if an emergency happens, like we're working on a project and something bad happens or emergency happens, I feel like you would be the person in the room that would lighten the mood, right? Make everybody feel like not depressed, or like come on, hey, like kind of lighten the. Like, my wife is a little bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love having her around when shit hits the fan, right? Because of that, right? I'm not like that at all. I'm actually like, when shit hits the fan, I go right into work mode. I'm not really like
Okay.
trying to make people feel better or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that just goes to show you, like, who, like, what my brand is versus what my wife's brand is, right? Like, and I think different people want different things, right? and
Yeah.
and I just, like, to me, that's what a brand is. And I think it also happens in the corporate world. Like, there are brands that I just don't trust, because I know that when something happens, I'm not even going to bother calling them, because I know they're not going
Mm.
to fix it. Whereas
Yeah.
then there are brands that I know that when something goes wrong, I know they're going to go over and beyond to help, right? Like
Yeah.
Amazon or Zappos or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you can't buy that with branding. Like,
Exactly. And
you have to live.
I think, to be honest, that I think personal branding is a lot of, I think it's misunderstood in a way, or we just have a different definition than other people. But because when I see a lot of like personal branding experts and coaches and people, I just feel like they're not doing personal branding. I think they're actually doing marketing, or sometimes advertising or social media content. It's not really branding, because for me, like with a corporate brand, or it needs to start deeper in who you are, what you believe in, what you stand up for, knowing the different situations, like you said, what happens in this situation, how will I behave then? Because you will not change your personality. You just have to accept who you are, and you can change a little bit your behavior maybe,
Yeah,
but you will not change who you are. And to own that, and then feel
the
like it
self-awareness.
is self-awareness, and then know, so now when I know who I am, who is my people? Like, who's my audience? Sometimes I do an exercise when I ask people to just pretend to be on stage, 500 people in the audience, close your eyes, and then like see those people in front of you. Who's your people? Like, who would make you feel really safe and good about yourself right now, that you want to share something with? Because that's your people. And then you open your eyes, like, who are they? We do that sometimes when we try to find a niche and know who to work with, because I think sometimes that people forget about the vibe, the personal connection with people, that you will
It's actually
want.
more important than what people consider target audience, right? Like, even the pain points and all of that, I think, is not as important as what you said, is who's my people.
Yes.
Because your people will buy from you even if they don't need the product or even if they don't have the pain.
Yeah, because they want to be around you somehow. And I think that to knowing who we serve, to knowing the people, I actually think that's the best starting point before we even think about our offer. So if we know who we want to work with, who we are for, then it's actually easier to find your offer, what you're going to offer them after. That's my opinion, because people get very lost when they're going to think a niche. So that's the difference, I think, with a personal brand, that we can really think about, like, who do I want to be surrounded by?
Yeah. And they'll, like, those people will actually tell you also what they want from
They
you.
will tell you what they want. and they want different things. And for example, I know I like AI. I work a lot with different AI, and I work ChatGPT several hours a day with different things, but more as my assistant. But I will never be this like efficient, talk about hustle, how to work less hours, how to use AI to be more
Productivity
effective.
hacks.
Yeah, that's not me whatsoever. People who love that, they will not come to me. I'm more about the why and the what more than the how. I'm more like, why do we do this? I can spend like hours with people figuring out their purpose and their mission and why they do what they do and who they want to be around. That's what really gives me joy. So people who come to me are very like heart-centered, emotional people often.
So that's actually something that I didn't expect to happen when I started my community. When I first started, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to teach some copywriting, marketing, and personal branding and things like that. I don't want to talk about like the self-help, spiritual, crap, right? But it was like very quickly I realized that actually those like we just talked about how connected those are, like finding yourself and those type of like self-discovery, and the more of the spiritual side is so important in branding. And do you find that, like, and I feel like you cannot really do this work without this.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, for me, like everything about branding is to find a deeper connection. The reason why we even buy something and we don't compete with price is because you give something that not your competitors give. I mean, I'm willing to buy something from you, and I don't even care about what it costs because I want what you have. I want to work with you. That's your personal brand. Otherwise, you have to compete with price, and we don't want to compete with price. So I think it's the same with personal brands as it is with a product brand or a company brand. That how much extra am I willing to pay for this thing? I know that this sweater is made at almost the same factory as this brand, but because we put on this logo on one of them and not the other, but it's almost the same quality, I'm willing to pay more for the one with the brand because it comes with a status, it comes with a belonging, and it makes me feel that it's part of my identity.
It comes with the story.
Yeah, it comes with the story. Yeah. So that's with the same thing with personal brands, that, I think it's important for us to be different and to stand out. And the way we can be different more than what we offer is leaning into who we are, so we attract the right people to us.
And I think that's kind of what I'm starting to realize. It's very different work than what I used to do as a designer or copywriter and things like that. It's more like I find it much more fulfilling. Like it's much more spiritual. It's much more people. Like I don't know how to say it, but it's much more deeper, emotional.
It is. People often cry. People always tell me that when I facilitate and I bring in real clients and they can be part of that, they're like, you always like brand therapy, Anneli. Like people start crying and open up. I'm like, yeah, but that's when you know it matters. That's when you know it matters. Otherwise, it's just, shallow. So I think that's what we need to remember about brands too, that I didn't care about when I was 12, 13. I didn't care so much about fashion because I wasn't raised like that, and people around me didn't care so much about that. But then when I started in a bigger school, the really cool kids, they did care. So the only reason why I wanted to have that pair of Levi's was not because they were so much better than my H&M jeans that mom bought me. It was because it put me in a place where I felt belonging with a group of people that I wanted to belong with. And it's helped me to have an identity that I wanted to have in front of those people. That was what the brand meant to me. It was an emotional connection and a way for me to feel belonging. And I think that's what a personal brand could be too, that when I have people who come to my community, and one day I just did an experiment, so I'm like, they're going to think that I'm so weird, but I just have to ask it. So I'm like, how many of you believe in magic? And everyone raised their hand. And I was like, no kidding, because I'm all about like magic and being weird and nerdy, like fantasy things. I think it's fun, you know? And I never thought about asking because I don't talk about that so often. And everyone raised their hand. I'm like, wow, you're really my people.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like those things that you wouldn't even like, that's not even directly related, like magic, right? Like, because that happened in my community too. Like, it turned out that a lot of people in my community either have like they either have like ADHD or they're like on the autism spectrum, and that's like, that was something that I found fascinating. I'm like, oh, like because that's something I never ever talk about, ADHD, or like I've never even once talked about it, but somehow I've attracted people that are similar to me.
Do you have ADHD?
I mean, I haven't been diagnosed for it, but like when people always tell me, I like, son, you probably have not ADHD, but I think people tell me that I'm probably on the autism spectrum.
Oh, okay.
So, or like they use the word neurodivergent.
Yeah. I am not officially diagnosed either, but I'm very 100% sure, and everyone around me that is diagnosing people and our psychologists are like, yeah, you are definitely ADHD. So I think actually we're like magnets of other people who are neurodivergent, because it's the same in my community. I think we are drawn to people who are similar to ourselves.
Yeah, I love what you said about the Levi's jeans too. Like I grew up like with a Walkman. I don't know if you remember Walkmans.
Yes.
So in my high school, we had every Friday we had Walkman day. You're not allowed to bring Walkman, but on Fridays you are. So everybody would bring their Walkman, and we would record like mixtapes for each other, and like you would record mixtapes for your girlfriend and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's like, so now when I see a Walkman, right? Like all of that memory and those stories all come back, and it's like it's much more than just a logo, right? It's like it's that deeper human connection than that. Imagine like being in a marketing meeting or branding meeting with Sony, and like people start crying, right? Like that is actually how it should be. A brand strategy should be, like you said, you work with clients and they cry when you're coaching sessions. Like that should actually happen in a brand strategy session in corporate world too, because
it does. The thing is, I do have a lot of CEOs that start crying when I work with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I actually I locked someone into a room one time because I was so tired that he didn't open up. It took 5 hours, and then he was like a new person after.
Oh, it's like that scene from Mad Men, where with Kodak, like when they were doing the carousel.
Yeah, I had to, because he was lost. So this is like, I can joke about it, but it was true, because he worked at a startup, and they grown really fast. And this is what happened a lot with a lot of clients like that. So they work for a startup, they're the founder, the company grows really fast, and they forget about why they started, because often they have a really cool founder story and they have a lot of personality and they're playful and fun from start. And then after a while, they start to wear a suit. Everything becomes really corporate, super boring. And he just totally lost his passion. So what I had to do, because I'm like, I can do a brand strategy, will be like very shallow, but I wanted to really understand the brand, and I knew the brand came from him. So I was like, I need to understand the deeper story here. That's why I need to understand him. But he was so resistant. But he actually called his wife and said, I will be a couple of hours late. And I was like, lock the door. We are going to have this conversation. But then the funny thing is, the day after, he just knocks on my shoulder on beside the coffee machine. And he's like, I want to show you something. And I was like, okay. He still had a gray suit. So he looked like everyone else and was kind of boring. But he showed me his socks, and he were happy socks, the happy socks with the colorful, with orange or pink, whatever it was, but it was a lot of colors. And then he said, thank you for helping me finding my inner Pippi Longstocking. And I don't know if you know, Pippi Longstocking is a Swedish.
I didn't know it was Swedish, but I know Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, so it's Swedish. And so he said, thank you for helping me find her. And what he meant by that is I helped him go back deep into the stories of why he even started this company, and to found those the joy back and the personality and playfulness back in the brand again. And for me, that's just a really good example of it is possible to do this kind of work for a corporate brand too. But you need to be a little like me, a little crazy, to lock people in, or to go really deep in facilitation, almost want to have people to cry, because that's when you get that breakthrough and people open up.
Yeah. It's like you almost have to be like a therapist.
Yeah. And also the thing that I want to say that, and no one knows it, so I will tell you first. I used to, a long time ago, I studied coaching, and the difference, and now maybe I will say something that upset your listeners, I don't know, but the difference for me with coaching and consulting is that a coach lead with questions and get people to have the answer themselves. A consultant or an advisor, they have the answer for you. They can also ask questions, but a coach is really the whole method is guiding you with questions so you find the answers yourself. So I used to study coaching 20 years back, but I did it with a very more performance-driven coaching, because he was for athletes. That coach is for some of the best athletes. High performance. So it was very much in performance. So now when I'm so into personal branding and helping brands find themselves, I'm so interested in that. I actually decided to go back and study coaching again. So next weekend, I will start my education. I will go for a year and go really deep in, so the people who have it have a background as psychologists. So it's going to be much more about the inner journeys. I'm really happy about this, because I feel this is the way naturally that I'm moving. I do my own inner journey, and now I want to help other people to do it too.
Yeah. I mean, from that story that you told, it almost sounds like even consultants can benefit from coaching, because if you're a brand strategist, from my experience, or even any kind of consultants, your first job is to help ask those questions and help them come to those answers first before you can actually do the work, right?
Yes.
Even if you're an architect or something like that, you have to help them find what the house that they really want to build first, before you even design that house for them or something like that, right?
You need to diagnose. The thing is, a strategist, a coach, and sales, if you do it the right way when you sell, is the same thing. It's all about diagnosing a problem. It's all about asking the right questions and let you find. That's how I teach brand strategy to beginners, because people are like, how can you teach brand strategy when they don't have so much experience? but I'm actually teaching them to become good facilitators. Because then the company, the founders or the people you work with, they have the answers about the company and the brand. And then you do research and you talk about it with the target audience and the customers, and they also have answers that you need. So when you put these together, the insights from the company and the insights from the customers and the audience, and you look at trends in the market, then you can actually analyze and you can decide about the positioning. So you don't have to be an expert actually in anything, but to be a really good facilitator.
Yeah. I like that. It's something that a lot of people don't know, right? Because what's brand strategy? Why do I need that? Or you know what I mean? Like that you can kind of grasp, like, okay, I'm paying for this logo design, or I'm paying for web design, or how many pages. Like those are all tangible things that you can.
But everyone is doing it almost. Like I have this now, I happen to have it here because I just did a talk about this. Oatly, one of my favorite brands, also Swedish, if you don't know that. I mean, look at this. Yeah. Look at this, like, cool. We love Oatly have such a great market communication. Their messaging is so on point. They talk about that it's like milk, but for humans. You know, all their messaging, they're like, even they have the founder story. They talk about sustainability. They're really good. But if we think about this and we see their messaging out there and we think they're cool, but how do they even show up like this? Why do they look the way they look? Why do they talk the way they do? Why is their messaging like this? It's because they have a really good foundation in a brand strategy. Otherwise, they will not even know what to say, how to say it, and where to show up. So that's why a brand strategy is important, because if we don't have that foundation, we will be like all over the place. So a lot of designers, especially designers, they already do a lot of this work because they ask questions, or in worst case, they have a questionnaire, which I really don't think you should have, but that's the easy way of sending something out. But they do need to have some answers to the question they have. Otherwise, they don't even know where to start to design. But if you don't ask the right questions...
Do you really think that most designers have that? Most designers that I know, they just start designing. I mean, they'll have that, like maybe they'll do the questionnaire, stuff like that. But they don't put a lot of attention to it. They can't wait till do the first draft.
Yeah, but okay, then we have to ask, but we just have to be honest and ask ourselves, if we are that person, how do you know how you are going to design that they will differentiate themselves from their competitors? And in what way are they going to be different? And what kind of personality do they want to show up as? There's so many things that how could you
I think
even
that's what
start
separates
designing?
Designers from creative directors. So obviously there are millions of designers out there, right? I think most of them stay designers for the rest of their life. I think a certain percentage of them make it up the chain of command to art directors or something like that. And then from there, a certain percentages that make it up to creative directors. And maybe some of them will end up creating their own agencies. But I just don't think that majority of them will ever get there, because majority of them think their job is to make something pretty.
Yeah, but whose fault is that? Is design schools that don't even teach anything about strategy or business? Because this is not like a rocket science. If someone learn that you need to know a couple of things before you start designing, because design is not art. Design is actually meant to solve a business problem. And if you don't know what problem you're solving, you don't know what the hell you're doing.
And I mean, I don't know if it's anyone's problem. I mean, I think it applies not just in design, though. Like because I also, my background is in programming, computer science.
Yeah.
And I code and I work with a lot of developers, but it's the same thing. Like 90% of developers will never understand like software architecture, usability, like core functionality. Like they'll never understand the high level things. That's why they stay just a programmer for the rest of their life. And I think it's the same thing in the medical field. Like almost in every field, I think majority of the people just understands the task that they do and not the high level reason why they do that. Do you know what I mean?
But I think it's, I still kind of blame school a little bit, because I think it's kind of easy to, I mean, I work with a designer right now. I think she has 6 years from design school, 3 years in one of the most prestigious schools.
I guess you can blame the schools because
yeah.
schools actually don't have a, I don't know if you know this history, but like at least in the United States, the whole reason for like the school systems got created, the school systems were created by the Rockefellers Foundation.
Okay.
And the whole reason why it got created is so that they can do the basic training, read, write, comprehension, certain things, so that they can create workers. Right? They don't want to create entrepreneurs. They want to create workers, right?
Yeah.
And I think our entire education system, if you look at the curriculums, they're designed to create workers to go out and fit into the system. They're not really designed to create entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So it's probably by design.
I think so too. And I think then you think that your role is to be an order taker, where the client is going to tell you what to do, and you start doing your work. And I just tell you that you're worth so much more. And not that I don't think it's amazing to be a designer. I definitely not think everyone should be a brand strategist. But to be able to understand how business work and how you build a brand and what your role could actually be if you want to start facilitate, so you can understand what kind of problems you're solving, that will change that will change your career.
I agree. And I think that's why like education's like this type of stuff you're doing is so important, because most designers will never learn that in school. And you know, and the ones that can learn that, it's the difference between, you know, the top creatives versus the other 90%.
And you know, a little sad thing is that a lot of designers think that branding is connected to design and marketing is something totally different. But the truth is, because I'm a marketing strategist from start, when we go to school, we study things like brand strategy, because we learn about mission and vision and values, and we do SWOT analysis, and we learn how to do research and positioning. All of these things that I do in a brand strategy, that's what we learn when we study marketing strategy. And none of those things are taught in art schools. So this is where I feel a responsibility.
I guess you have to major in marketing.
Yeah, you do. And so,
or business.
So a lot of people confuse, they think marketing is advertising, and they think marketing is short term. When marketing is actually really strategic, if you think what market is, because that's understand your market and what kind of products and services that they need and how you will develop that. So that's very strategic. So there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about the difference between branding and marketing and who's doing what. And, you know, so I'm just trying to do my best from my experience to help people.
You know, it's the same in, I think it's the same in other majors as well. Like my cousin's a dentist. And even like he owns his own practices. And, you know, most dentists will never own their own practice.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's the ones that own their own practice that can like really change. Like, same thing with law firms. Like, you know, the ones that own their own practices are going to be the ones who can be more creative and things like that. And I think that's it's not just in design and marketing, but I think through all industries, I think it's kind of like that. Like none of us learn business, and I just feel like business, like what you said about marketing, those type of things, is something that almost everybody should learn.
Yeah.
Even if you're an actor.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard the story. Like if you look at like Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, like they were in Bad Boys 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And like, at that time, Martin Lawrence was more famous than Will Smith.
Yes.
And now it's completely the opposite, right? And one of the things is like Will Smith is so good at promoting himself. Like whenever they do these launches, he goes to every interview, every showing, every event, right? And Martin Lawrence hates doing that. It's like he doesn't promote himself. And you can clearly see like the difference in their careers just because one knows how to market himself and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
And so like I think it applies in almost everything,
It does, but even worse, that we don't learn in school how to start a business. I mean, to become entrepreneurs, like you said. I mean, it's horrible. If you study in art school or creative school, whatever, for like 3 years or something, there's a lot of those people who will start their own businesses, and there's no class in how to run your own business.
That's true.
How to get clients, how to market yourself. So I think that's maybe, we're grateful for people like Christo and the Future and others who actually educate many people. Thank you. And you. So educate so many people, because I think that's kind of why I want to help people to see, and I don't judge anyone. If someone wants to do art and they're really passionate about that, and that is what they want to do, I'm so happy if they can live their passion and make a living out of that. Someone else are really passionate about making an impact in the world and want to save animals or whatever it is, then that person needs to think about, what can I do in my work? Maybe I want to learn how to facilitate and help clients to find problems so I can make also a bigger impact and work with clients who start listening to me. So it depends. Everyone have their own dreams. I just feel like there's so many people out there who are undervalued, who are creative thinkers, and who are great at solving the big problems that we have out there in the world. But if you don't know how to talk to clients, if you don't know how to talk business, you will never have a seat at the C-suite table, and you will never have a really big impact. And that's why I get sad, because I think there are too many suits, too many Excel sheet people, who have all the power, when actually the more creative souls could be so impactful and do so much good things, but no one listens because they don't know how to speak business. That's what I want to change.
I think there are, like, you're right, like I think even activism is really marketing, right? And like politics is also marketing. Like I think almost everything is like, if you want to raise awareness, it's like even religion is marketing. But I think that there are creatives, a lot of talented creatives who can do that, but just don't know how to do that. And those are the people that you can help. And then I think there are a lot of them who just don't care. Like they're happy sitting in their basement making their art. And they're completely content with that, and they don't want to sell it, or and that, I think that's completely fine.
That's totally fine. And you're so right when it comes also to that Will Smith story. It's like, just look at social
Martin
media.
Lawrence is happy.
And look at social media and everything out there. It's not the people who are the most successful, the most have the best track record, have the best careers. It's not the one who have the most followers out there. It's people who really put themselves out there and to want to be seen and to share their things. So there are nothing. Sometimes I get sad that there's so many stars out there. The real heroes from agencies, the people who really know how to do the work.
Like the rock star,
the rock stars, they're not on social media. So there are a lot of people on social media who actually don't have so much experience. They don't care, and that's maybe sometimes that we need to be a little bit critical too about don't buy into some crap about how to make 100K a month, how to make 50K, whatever people start to sell. It's are these people really have any experience whatsoever, or are they just scam artists trying to sell something to people who are desperate? That drives me crazy, you know? If I'm going to slap someone in the face one time in my life, it's people like that on social media.
Yeah.
Like quick wins.
Yeah, I actually
you know?
think that the rock stars that you're talking about, the fact that they don't want to be known or they don't want to go and play that game, it's probably also part of their brand. It's their part of their personality that's so ingrained in them that makes them good at what they do. Like a good example of that is Banksy,
Yes,
graffiti artist.
yes.
Like nobody knows his face. Like he's not trying to go out there and become famous and make a lot of money, right? Like he's just he literally is actually anti that, and he just focused on his art.
Yeah.
And look where that brought him, right?
Exactly.
And so I think that like that's almost like just doubling down on yourself. And even though he didn't do the whole brand strategy, he almost kind of did, because he doubled down on on his authentic self, and he just fully went for it, right? And I guess that's why what you're saying is so important, is because in order to be like Banksy, we really need to understand who we are and like what we're not. Yeah.
And also like to understand that we don't have to pretend to be something that we're not. I think that's the most important thing too, because people will still see it. It's so easy to see through. It's so easy to see the real person.
That's true.
And the more you're just trying to show up there and be like so confident and I know it all, and like, it's like, don't pretend, just be honest with who you are and your experience, and do really good work and put in the effort, and people will notice you. You don't have to, it's not
over time, people will,
and it's not the same thing to be vulnerable and to be transparent and open, to share all the trauma stories from your childhood. That's not the same thing. I'm not saying that you have to do that. People share what they want to share, but to show up and share with people who you are and show your true self, because it's also so much more fun to lean into who you are and feel comfortable about that. I'm not afraid right now that someone will attack me for something, because I'm just like telling everything, And that's such a good feeling, instead of trying to pretend to be someone else, or to show up as someone else.
Yeah, other people can't attack you. Like, people can't make fun of you if you make fun of yourself. Like
exactly. No, I think it just, in a way, you just kind of have to own it, because we're still, all of us are little children on the inside, and we remember our parents or other influential people in our life. We remember their voices in our head, which is like, you're not good enough, or you could do better, and whatever we've been hearing. And that's what we continue to tell ourselves. And I just think we all need to give ourselves a little grace, and to just do our best, show up, and just like,
and you're right about like that. People can tell if you're not, if you're trying to be something you're not. Like, and I think like a good example of that is like kind of that period in like the 90s that Apple went through. Because like when Apple went through a dark period in the 90s, right? Because like in the 80s, they were like all about the, the users and the, the designers, the programmers, and like that was a community that they were serving.
Yeah.
And then kind of after Steve Jobs left, like they try to like force this brand on them, right? And then they made all these products that are unrelated. They weren't connecting with their audience, and they kind of almost went bankrupt. And then like when Steve Jobs came back, they found it again. So they like that example just goes to show you how you can't fake it. Like
no, exactly, you can't. And also, you know what? I was in a football game the other day. You say soccer, I think, like our football,
yeah.
And I have
Proper
this
football.
Yes, I have this like favorite team here, and I talked to one of the really big fans that I know, and I'm like, what is it that makes this team so special? Because I think it's interesting from a brand perspective. Like, what if we could build brands that have fans like these kind of teams? It's like amazing. And he's like, it's all about belonging. Like, okay, how do you mean? He's like, it doesn't matter who plays in the team. Players comes and go, but the culture and the team are still there. And we feel the belonging of being in this team together. It's totally a culture. It's songs, it's the clothes they wear, it's like the routines, like they have all these things that
the history.
the stories that you want a brand to have. And I was like, is there any brand out there who's actually doing something close to this? And the only one I can think about that feels a little bit like that is Harley Davidson, because they still have a little bit of a tribe where it's like people have a tattoo and they're like, I'm part of this belonging. But if you think about Nike, for example, they're not really doing that, because they're really good at the individuals. They sponsor individual stars and you can feel like a star yourself.
You know what I think who does do that within Nike though? The Jordan brand within Nike.
Yeah,
does
maybe.
do that.
Yeah.
And also I'm a huge Harley Davidson fan, actually.
Oh, okay, cool.
Davidson.
Yeah.
And Harley Davidson actually went through a rough period too. Like there was a period of time when, and then they had to like make a comeback. Like,
okay.
But so you're absolutely right. Like once they kind of let go, because Harley Davidson like always has been known for like quality engineering, like well built, and things like that. And they've kind of lost that in the 80s and 90s, and then like they recently made a comeback. So they brought all of their plants back to the US. And
I love that story. So I think it's like, if we can think about it like that, because I would love to see, for example, Nike be even more like that. Like, because I can find the athlete within myself, but it's still very individual. For me, it's still very American because it's very like individual. I want to think more about the community. Like, how would I feel like my tribe of Nike people? What can we create together? Like, what do we have in common? Like, why do I want to show up with them? So I think there's so many things
that's why I think the Jordans are, because Jordans, they come up with new Jordans every year, and it's like the Jordan one, like, and it's been for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And the first Jordan came out when I was in I think when I was in junior high. And you can still find people selling them on eBay, and there's a huge community around like Nike Jordans.
I like Nike Jordan. I have several. I just never felt the community. So maybe I'm a little bit outside. Maybe I'm not the one of the like really
maybe you
fans.
need to go on Reddit.
Yeah, I think I did. So, but I think, but the idea of it, like is just interesting to see, like what can brands learn from that kind of belonging, that kind of building a tribe? What can we learn from that? Or what can we learn from artists, singers, famous people who are really good at building their personal brand?
Taylor Swift.
Exactly. What can a company learn from that? So I think that's the only reason why I really feel I want to keep like one foot.
Now that you're talking about all of this, like one brand that I would love to work with is like working on like a city brand for a city.
Yes.
Like like Seoul, or like whatever, New York. Like, because like I feel like that would be so interesting because it's already there. Like there's already a brand, and there's already a strong roots, stories, community. All of that is already there.
I actually done that for the city where I live. I did the destination marketing for that. Yeah, for that brand. Yeah, so it was pretty cool.
Sounds
it would
so
be fun to do it for a bigger too. But so this is like what's fun talking about this is like it's always like work still that we want to do. So even if I don't feel so passionate about doing client work anymore, and even if I'm like 50, been 30 years in this industry, when we start talking about it, I will still be like, it will still be cool to maybe do a product for Nike or do a product for that brand, just because I think there's still things to do when it comes to connection with people, like to building this kind of connection, human connections and tribes. There's still work to be done there.
Yeah, it just I reminded me. You reminded me because of when you were talking about the football team.
Yeah.
Because the football team is very closely tied to their city too, right?
Yes.
So it's like that the personality of that city is almost ingrained in there, right? Like, it's so interesting.
Yeah. I love that. And it's like, it's a culture of like this team that I go on, and it's like, it's a very like kind of worker mentality. It's like
blue collar
it is. So all the
class,
songs, everything is like very like, it's politically sometimes, and like so I think that belonging is even more stronger in a way, because it's a part of the city that is known for a specific thing, and the team is connected to that.
It has such a strong brand already that to work to make that like come to life would be so fun.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel, but I also think personal branding is extremely important. But I love the way. I think a lot of my influences comes from Christo, because he's the one, of course, who's been coaching and helping me a lot. But I love how he really like embrace going down to who you are and discover who you are. And it's not just about the marketing and getting followers on social media. We need to start with ourselves first. Exactly the same thing as we do when we work with corporate brands.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I think we talked for
it's been a
2.5 hours now. Just like last time we talked.
It's just been a very interesting time talking to you, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I like you've kind of reignited my interest in like the therapy story that the story that you told me about working with the CEO of that the startup company. Like it really inspired me. So you ignited a new fuel in my love for brand strategy.
Oh, I love that, because I think that we also need to go out there and tell people that, brand strategy is also, that's why a lot of us creative people need to do it, because when, the suit people and Excel people, when they do brand strategy, they make it so much about data and numbers and that kind of research. They forget about that it's about people and understanding people on a deeper level and understanding the client, and really like, we're all just a little kid inside, and we need to find that. We need to find the true stories and the origin story and the founder story and where everything started. And when we can do that, that's when everything comes to life.
The data is only it's because the data still needs to tell a story, right? Because the data by itself is just numbers, and you need to understand, and like the data can never give you like the stories that like that sports team you're talking about, right? Like the stories that those the blue collar worker and all of those, like yes, it'll tell you like who they live where and all of those points, but it'll never, you have to connect the dot between that and how does it fit the story.
Yes.
I love
that. I think that to bring in that, to not be afraid that imagination, creativity, all of those things that we're often really good at, that's what sparks the magic in a brand. And that's often what we're good at bringing to the table.
I love it. I like how you made brand strategy into almost like it's like therapy. Like it's like so how can people work with you, like if whether they want to work with you, get coaching from you, or maybe even like work with you, or like how,
so I do some client work still. So if that is I do mostly coaching for CEOs and founders, and sometimes I do brand strategy, just to kind of keep myself sharp. And then I have a coaching group that I work with that you just reach out to me if you're interested in that. And I also do one-on-one coaching. So I have a little bit different courses too, but right now I don't know how that will look like in 2 months because I will change a little bit.
Your coaching is it like a set start time to end, or is it like ongoing thing?
It's an ongoing thing, will be from next year, because the thing is, when I have programs or I have a boot camp or a program, that is from one day to another. And I don't know how long that will be. Right now it's 8 weeks, a boot camp. But then you need to learn the skills first, right? So that's the foundation to actually learn how to do it. But it's not done there, because a lot of people, when you do a transformation, you need to also go out there and position yourself. You need to build your personal brand. You need to get clients and know how to sell it. So that's what I do in the coaching after, because if you know your skills, but you don't know how to get clients, then you will never have the transformation. So that's why I teach it first and then I coach after.
Got it. Is it set up like the Future Pro group, where it's like the group you meet on Zoom, you ask questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then
so
you can also do one-on-one.
Yeah, and I do a lot of, like, what I love doing is it's called active learning, like active teaching. So it's a lot about learning by doing. It's very influenced by IDEO, and I love teaching that way, where I bring in a scenario, for example, and people can solve a problem, and then we talk about it. We do role play. I bring in real clients so they can facilitate with real clients. We do sales calls. Like, I'm not an academic. I like to do things and to learn by doing things. I think a lot of creatives are like that. So you can get a lot of free information today on AI, like ChatGPT, Google, whatever. Everything is almost for free nowadays. But ChatGPT can never be there in the room and actually coach you and be beside you and train you. And that's what I'm leaning more and more into. I want to do more facilitation training and like hands-on train people instead.
I agree. Because that's when you really learn. Like, so you can read a book all you want. Because like I've done that before, where I read a book on something and then I try to go do it for my client or do it for myself, and then I get stuck right away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, it didn't tell me about this.
Yes.
And then like I need somebody to kind of handhold me to do it.
And you know what? There's like a check-in with your ego when you show up in my class. And now I'm not talking about the coaching, but the class. And you maybe been in industry for like 15, 20 years, like a lot of designers have. And they actually think they're pretty good at facilitation. And I bring in a real client, and they're totally mess up. But the thing is, what's so good is that you can't really mess up, because you're in a safe space where no one else is watching what you're doing. I'm there beside you. So even if we have the real client, what we can do is that I'm like, okay, time out. I stop it. And I'm like, what happened? What happened now? How do you feel? We talk about it. Then I turn to the client. I'm like, how did you feel in this situation? And the client can tell how she or he felt in the situation. And then we learn together, and then we do it again and again and again until everyone feels really comfortable. So what happens then is that I'm beside them and I can coach them through it. And they also get to hear how the client, a real client, actually perceive the situation. I mean, where can you learn like that? You can't ask a client what they think when you have a meeting. So I'm trying to use my own intuition and experience and not learn so much how to become a teacher. I teach the way I think someone would learn the best way to be prepared for reality.
Yeah. It's almost like they're learning by doing.
Yes, right? It's learning by doing.
It's like because when you do it, you for me, when I actually go and execute, like I can clearly see, okay, I made a mistake there, or I did something wrong here. Like,
And when you have someone beside you, that's what's so strong. When you have someone like who can help you, like what happened here. Like, and I can model it. I can show how I do it, and then you can do it yourself. Like, that's the best way of learning. Yeah. So
Okay, so how do they do you have a website for this
yes,
coaching
so
program?
annelihansson.com is my website. So just check out what I'm doing. I'm very active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So if you want to follow me there, Anneli Hansson, you're welcome to do that. And I'm a person who actually have contact with my followers every day. So if you DM me, if you reach out to me, I always answer. I answer in my comments. I interact with people. So you're welcome to do that, because I create content because I want to talk to people.
That's awesome. I'll put all of your links, all your social handles, so people can go reach out to you and talk to you. Yeah, thank you. This was like so helpful, so amazing. Thank you for sharing so openly. I hope we can do it again someday.
Yeah, I would love to have you on my podcast. I'm just having a little bit pause right now because I had so much to do. But I hope that I was authentic as fuck. Was I?
Yes, you were very authentic as fuck. Thank you. And yeah, I would love to come on your podcast whenever. Just let me know. And
yeah, that would
we'll
be
make it
awesome.
happen.
Okay, take care now.
Thank you, Anneli.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.